There's a side of Connecticut that rarely shows up on tourist maps. A quieter world that once thrived, then quietly disappeared. Not because of a massive disaster, and not because of some haunting legend, but because time has a subtle way of fading a place into silence. From villages submerged beneath man-made lakes to factory towns that stopped breathing, this small state holds layers of history few ever take the time to explore. And that's where our journey begins, through 15 places that are no longer bustling, but still whisper stories to anyone willing to listen. In the quietest corner of the Litchfield Hills lies a place that's always the first whisper when people talk about Connecticut's ghost towns, Dudleytown. It was never a big city or even a grand village, just a small 18th century settlement that slowly vanished, as if the forest had decided to reclaim it. What's interesting is, its decline wasn't due to legends or curses, despite the exaggerated tales. The soil was poor for farming, harvests failed over and over, and the residents began to leave, one by one. Once they were gone, nature moved in. Moss grew over stone foundations, old paths disappeared under leaves, and the only sound left was the forest itself. Once home to a small community known as Little Westport, this quiet part of Reading was once full of life. Back in the 18th century, the village sat among open fields, horse trails, and long stone walls, many of which still remain as markers of the past. Little Westport was never large, but it was lively enough to have homes, gardens, and a small trade route connecting it to neighboring villages. But then, the economic flow shifted. As Reading's center of activity moved toward more accessible and populated areas, Little Westport was quietly pushed aside. Farmland became harder to maintain, jobs moved elsewhere, and families left, one after another. No disaster, no drama, just a slow and quiet fade. Here in the hills of Connecticut once stood an old settlement known as Catlin's Settlement. Built in the mid-17th century, this small village was home to farming families trying to make a stable life out of rocky soil. In its prime, Catlin's Settlement was more than just a dot on the map. It was a web of interconnected family life. But the land proved too difficult to work, and over time, more residents left in search of better opportunities. The village lost income, lost workers, and finally lost its people. There was no great tragedy, just the slow grind of nature and economy moving on. By the early 1800s, the settlement was nearly completely abandoned. If there's a place that feels like time itself wanted to forget it, Pilfershire is it. There's no town gate, no official sign, and its name is more likely to be passed along by hikers than found in history books. What's called a village here is really just fragments of life. Lines of stone walls leading nowhere, sunken spots in the earth where basements once stood, and old trails that feel like they were walked 100 times by people who are long gone. What's striking is that nothing dramatic erased it. People simply left, chasing new jobs, easier land, or just a clearer path forward. The forest took over without rushing, and today, anyone who hikes through Pilfershire finds something rare. A village that didn't die tragically. It simply faded with an eerie kind of grace. Unionville disappeared in a way all its own. It didn't collapse, burn, or get abandoned overnight. This small town, once alive with the rhythm of factories, the hammering of tools, and the steady flow of the Farmington River, slowly shrank until all that remained was its outline. Walk along the old railbed or the riverbank, and it feels like stepping into an in-between space. Not quite a town, but not ruins either. At its peak, Unionville was a working-class world. There were rows of houses, canals that powered machines, and iron bridges that carried goods out of the valley. But when Connecticut's industries began to shift, the machines stopped before the people did. Daily life softened into stillness, shops closed, and the factories emptied out. Coming here feels like stepping into a missing page of a book. Deep in the trees of Patchogue State Forest lie the quiet remnants of an old settlement. Homes, fields, and narrow paths, now only visible through dips in the ground and broken stone walls. There are no signs, no plaques, no markers that dozens of families once lived here. It's as if the forest swallowed everything without a single objection. This land was once home to farmers and families trying to carve out a life on unforgiving soil and in harsh seasons. They made practical choices, planting what would grow, raising what they could, surviving however possible. But over time, the truth became clear. Voluntown simply didn't offer enough reason to stay. Wandering through Bolton, especially the area around Bolton Notch, you'll notice something slightly off. The forest feels peaceful, yet scattered within it are pieces of a past life. Crumbling stone house foundations, centuries-old dry-stacked walls, and dirt paths that once carried horse-drawn wagons between Hartford and Willimantic. In the 18th and 19th centuries, this spot was a strategic stop for craftsmen, farming families, and traders who relied on old routes like the Boston Post Road. The problem? Bolton sits on tough land. Rocky soil meant farming often failed, and as industry shifted toward larger cities, Bolton lost its appeal. Many families simply left, and small buildings, workshops, barns, and laborers' cabins slowly fell apart. Gay City isn't just a ghost town. It was a small social experiment that faded into silence. In the early 1800s, the Gay family and a group of idealistic settlers built a self-sustaining industrial community in a quiet valley between Hebron and Bolton. But Gay City faced a tougher enemy than the economy, its own isolation. It sat far from major trade routes. The land was poor, and its glass factory, meant to power the town, kept burning down or failing to meet demand. Internal tensions between families and labor disputes made things worse. One by one, the buildings shut down, and by the late 1800s, the colony had fully given up. Today, walking through Gay City State Park, you won't find a clear town. What's left are scattered stone foundations, sunken building sites, and a quiet valley that seems to have chosen to decay without witnesses. Today, Madison is known as a bright, polished coastal town, but behind that calm reputation, it hides the remnants of old communities nearly forgotten. Far from the Hammonasset shoreline, deeper inland, there are woods and fading paths where small families once lived. Farmers, charcoal makers, and workers who depended on shallow rivers for energy. One especially interesting area lies in northwest Madison, once home to small houses, sawmills, and dirt roads that led toward Killingworth. Nothing remains fully intact, just low stone foundations, earth pits where barns once stood, and dry walls still surviving under thick brush. Many families left as Madison shifted toward a shoreline economy, first trading, then shipping, and eventually tourism. Known today as a busy coastal region filled with lighthouses, beaches, and traces of colonial life. But beyond the modern buzz, there's a part of Waterford that feels like a missing chapter. Deep inland, especially around Jordan Village and the old routes toward Montville, you'll find scattered remains of small settlements that no longer appear on any map. Stone farmhouse foundations from the 1700s, dry stacked walls that end abruptly, and old trenches that were once canals powering mills. These areas were once home to families trying to blend small-scale farming with cottage industries, charcoal making, sawmills, and limestone work from nearby cliffs. But Waterford's proximity to the new London port turned it into a kind of escape town. Many residents left for busier, more promising areas. In the end, Waterford's interior was abandoned not by disaster, but by practical choice. Today, Cheshire looks like a polished suburban town, good schools, tidy homes, and well-lit roads. But go a little deeper into the northern and western woods, and you'll find a different side. The scattered remains of old communities that existed before the town fully grew. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Cheshire's backcountry was home to farming families and small-time miners. Dirt trails once connected wooden cabins, stone foundations supported barns, and narrow streams turned water wheels for sawmills. When the barite mines in West Cheshire began operating, the area briefly thrived. Small shops, timber sheds, and worker homes slowly appeared. Today, what's left are low stone walls, wooded paths that feel like they used to be busy, and a sense that Cheshire once held a smaller world, now guarded by trees. Preston has always been in the middle of everything, and yet somehow still feels hidden. Between the routes to Norwich and Mystic, small forest pockets once held villages, clusters of homes around a sawmill, a wooden church, and tight farmland. Many of these villages didn't last, not because of tragedy, but because Preston gradually shifted life toward the river areas and trading roads. One of the most interesting areas lies in southeastern Preston, near the Ledyard border. Here, you can still spot low stone foundations, dry walls that point toward a road now used mostly by deer, and shallow ditches that once irrigated fields. Back in the 19th century, these settlements survived through farming, charcoal production, and water-powered mills run by narrow streams. Hopeville was once a small village built for one reason: fast-moving water. Along the banks of the Patchogue River, its founders built textile mills and a grist mill, and soon wooden houses rose around the industrial site. But as the textile industry shifted to larger, more efficient locations, Hopeville began to lose its pulse. The mills shut down, homes were abandoned, and the village slowly became a skeleton of wood along the river. By the mid-20th century, the area was flooded for a small dam project, forming what we now know as Hopeville Pond. What remains today isn't buildings, but a feeling. Moss-covered stone walls nearly swallowed by the earth, shallow depressions where homes once stood, and forest paths that seem worn by long-forgotten footsteps. This is the kind of ghost town that leaves people confused. The buildings are still standing, the walkways still visible, but everything feels like a world paused, waiting for a new script. In the 19th century, the village thrived thanks to Johnson Mill, which produced yarn and lumber for the East Haddam region. There was a small school, workers' homes, a community hall, and a simple but steady daily life. As industry declined, the village faded. Then came its strange second life. In the 1960s and 70s, a businessman named Raymond Schmidt bought and restored Johnsonville's old buildings, even relocating historic structures from elsewhere to build an ideal Victorian-era village. But the grand vision stalled. Legal issues, high costs, and plans that never fully took shape. The result? A village that didn't collapse or vanish. It just stopped. Before Candlewood Lake became the bright, busy recreational spot it is today, that valley was home to a small village called Jerusalem, where a few farming families lived alongside forests, cornfields, and dirt roads that connected them to New Fairfield and Brookfield. There was no big town center, just wooden houses, a small church, some gardens, and wagon trails now sitting dozens of feet underwater. In 1926, a bold project by Connecticut Light and Power changed the valley forever. They built a dam and pumped water from the Housatonic River to fill it, creating the country's first large man-made lake. The people of Jerusalem were relocated, houses were dismantled, barns left to fall, and whatever was too heavy to move was simply abandoned. As the water rose, the village disappeared, quietly, without drama.